So our next speaker also has a story of resilience, one taught to him by his grandma. Tony Giordana is a senior from Green Bay, Wisconsin, majoring in communication and media studies, and on the verge of completing what he describes as an uncommon college experience. In his talk, he will shift the way that you look at alcohol in our lives and in our society. Give it up for Tony Giordana.
We started to find them everywhere. You name it, that's where we found it. On the bookshelf, the back porch, the garage. It was getting bad. But we didn't realize just how bad it was getting until we found a beer can hiding underneath the hood of her car, sitting on the engine. That's life living with a family member who is an alcoholic. They go to any means to get their fix, and are willing to do anything to hide it from their loved ones. In my family, the alcoholic was my grandmother. When she was 70 years old, my grandmother fell into depression and turned to alcohol as her medicine. During this phase of her life, she came to live with me and my mother. I was just 12 years old. At that young age, I remember I would pick her up off the floor because she was too drunk to stand or walk, and I would often try to stay in my room to avoid the possibility of an encounter with her. The suffocating stress that I felt to not just be in that situation, but to also see the impact it had on my mother was very fatiguing. My grandmother spent the rest of her 6 years sober in an assisted living facility after a fall, and has since passed away almost 2 years ago. It is of course important to acknowledge that my family and I keep the good memories of my grandmother on the forefront of our minds, with more good memories than bad when we think about her. So how did we get to this point? How did this beautiful grandmother of mine, who loved to laugh and who loved her family, who earned a reputation of being a hard worker and a respected mother of 5, become a struggling alcoholic? It's hard to reconcile, but we can start to understand it by exposing a glaring yet hidden problem in our society of the normalization of alcohol. Before I do that, I want to make clear that my talk tonight is not about persuading you to never drink again. It's not to have alcohol abolished, nor petition for another prohibition. What I do want to expose, however, is the presence and the impact of alcohol on our life and our society, something I had to learn when I was way too young. I'm thankful for being gifted this life perspective, this life experience of mine, because it guided me toward a lifestyle quite different than many of my peers. As of today, I am 22 years old, and I have never had a drop of alcohol in my life, ever. I've navigated a 21st birthday and nearly 4 full years of college life without ever consuming as much as a single drop. Now, I'm not saying this to boast nor suggest that I'm better than anyone else, but I've simply made a personal choice. I'll be honest, before starting college, I was quite frightened about how I would navigate this phase of my life, notorious for parties and for going out. Was I going to be expected and pressured to consume alcohol by my peers who didn't know that my own introduction to drinking culture already occurred in my own family, a beloved family member in the grips of addiction? One day in the summer before my freshman year here at St. Norbert College, my older brother Mike, who I'm extremely close with, said to me, "Tone, if you start drinking, I'll kick your ass." Well, he was joking, of course, about the ass-kicking part, but it was in that moment I decided the answer is clear. I just won't drink, ever. From that day forward, drinking alcohol has never even been a temptation. I feel I have a clearer view on the larger, painful, societal problem that we have, the way that our culture adores, promotes, and fully normalizes alcohol and its consumption. It is a given that if you have a 21st birthday, you will get drunk. It is a given that if you go to a sporting event or tailgate, you will most likely get drunk. It is a given that if you go to a happy hour, alcohol will be served. Why do we equate happiness with drinking alcohol? What most of us don't fully appreciate is that alcohol is a very serious drug and a highly addictive one. Now with that, I think it's crucial for us to compare how alcohol is different from other addictive drugs. Well, first, it's normalized. There are no billboards for cocaine sales, there are no commercials for heroin use, and there is no methamphetamine aisle at the local Walgreens or Quick Trip. Yet there is for alcohol. Second, our culture literally tells us that alcohol is the escape from stress, a magical antidote to make us more social at parties, more fun at gatherings, and make all celebrations more enjoyable. Has anyone here ever got to the end of a long day or a long week and said, "Whew, I need a drink"? Well, that's because our culture has taught us that alcohol is the solution to our stresses. Third, we have blurred lines within our society of when we actually consider our alcohol consumption to be a problem. Is it not a problem because you're in college? Is it not a problem because you have kids or careers that stress you out? Is it not a problem because you only do it on weekends? This is our complacency with alcohol being a coping mechanism to our stress. According to a 2017 study, they found that 1 in 8 American adults, or roughly 13% of the US population, now meets the criteria to officially be considered an alcoholic. We also need to start thinking about and noticing how accessible we make alcohol purchases in our life and our society. Consider the idea that someone battling addiction is only one trip to the convenience store away from relapsing, or an appearance at the office Christmas party away from drinking again. Once again, that's not the case with these other addictive drugs. Within the last decade, studies have shown some somber statistics around Alcoholics Anonymous, the 12-step program to alcohol abstinence. In the book, The Sober Truth, by Lance and Zachary Dodds, they cite the success rate of AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, the 12-step program to alcohol abstinence. Success rate is somewhere between 5 and 10%, meaning that roughly 1 in every 15 people who enter this process are actually able to become and remain sober. 1 in 15. So what is the solution to this problem of alcohol being so normalized? I think it starts with changing the amount of exposure that we allow alcohol to have in our society. We need to start thinking about when and how alcohol is being advertised. Multiple studies have shown that on average, adolescents will see somewhere around 245 television ads for alcohol each year, as well as magazines, billboards, and radio. Besides that, alcohol advertising in general is much higher than any other industry. Within the last decade, as I mentioned, between 2010 and 2020, 2 of the top 3 advertisers during the Super Bowl were Bud Light and Budweiser. Remember when cigarettes were viewed as cool or not harmful? But then conversations began about the truth of cigarettes, the health risks, and regulation over when and how they're advertised or made accessible. Now, cigarettes are viewed as harmful, with a critical perspective around when they're advertised or how they're consumed. That's what I want alcohol to be thought of by the next generation of our society, by our kids and our grandkids, that alcohol is not a toy, it's not a helpful escape, and it's not a required social activity. That is what I envision. Who is that person in your life that you love so dearly that could slip into the grasp of alcoholism? I never would have thought that that person would have been my kind and loving grandmother, but it goes to show just how serious excessive alcohol consumption really is. The grip of an alcohol addiction is so strong and unrelenting that it can bring you to your knees in weakness. It can take everything you have from you, and it can tear your family apart. So let's start having conversations, raising awareness, and if nothing else, begin to realize the prominence of alcohol in our society by simply acknowledging the advertising, accessibility, and the overall influence of alcohol around you. We need to reevaluate our relationship with alcohol, and in doing so, we can truly achieve a safer and healthier society. Thank you.